All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. That's it. It's a wrap. Season's over. Chiefs are the winner. It was a fantastic game to break it all down. Two of the best doing it. My good man Lou Holder from Holder on Sports. Lou, always glad to have you on the show. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks so much, sir. I appreciate you, Doug.
I feel like I must not be blowing it when people will come back on the show. It's always good to see a face back. And from the red inside the red zone lab, Duce. I think I blew that as much as
It's
I could
it's
there. So
it's all good, dude. How y'all doing today, man?
doing good.
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 Let's start with this. Deuce, I know we talked briefly before I started this thing. You were at the house. I was over at my aunt's house. Lou, I don't know, were you out or and about for this thing, or were you at the
Uh,
house?
I actually was in Philly. I was actually in Philly. I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, so I have a lot of family that's still in the Philadelphia area. I have twin sisters that live in that area. So one of them lives right by Franklin Field. Anybody who's familiar with that area, right by Drexel and Penn, right in that area. So, um, anytime I get a chance to be with my parents who are both in their 80s, and anytime that's around, so I just drove up there and want to just be part of the whole atmosphere. So it was kind of interesting because in my family, there's the whole NFC East is represented. Me, my wife, and my mother, we're Washington fans. Um, my sisters and their husbands and family are all Eagles fans. And then I have a cousin who's a Giants fan, and my dad is a Dallas fan. So when we get into a room together, um,
It's go
it's
time.
it's like that. It's all the way live. It's all the way live. So
Now, Lou, do you get to talk trash to the Eagles fans, even though they made it to the Super Bowl and lost, or you just got to tip your hat and say, "We'll see you next year"?
no, I mean I tip my hat. I mean now they don't want to hear that because they were mad. They wanted to win that thing, and rightfully so. You get all the way there, and you never know. It was 5 years in between. We know it's been way longer for 5 years in the Washington area. So when you get there, you know, but Philly, with that loss in the World Series that they recently had, and they lost in the MLS final, they're just like frustrated that something hasn't happened yet. So, but no, I didn't talk trash because I know football. And it was like that was a great season. And I know we'll get into it. Their organization is built right. I
Yep.
mean, their organization is really built right. So how am I going to hate on, I can't talk trash to somebody. You can only talk trash when you're not trash. You know what I'm saying?
Well, then we ain't talking nothing, Lou.
Yeah. So I can't really, and especially the whole Carson Wentz thing, which was their original and our twice leftover. I can't really say much because in the room, I was the only person that didn't have a person from the NFC East in the playoffs. So there's not really much I could say except frustration, extreme frustration, knowing that I think Washington, if they got in there, could have gave a little better fight than some of the other, teams. Because this team, the Washington team, they beat Hurts and the Eagles on a Monday night game. So what San Fran did, I'm saying to myself, man, we could have at least represented a little bit better than that. So I can't really talk too much trash, but again, when family gets together, at the end of the day, family's the big W for me. And anytime I get a chance to put thing on family, that was cool for me. That's where I was. I was in Philly.
No doubt. Deuce, what was the star at the show on the spread last night?
I don't really do spreads, Doug. But I think one of the things for me, kind of the sort of things like what Lou mentioned, and just thinking about um the spread and different places that we go and family members. Like I have what we call our Philadelphia family, where they live in Philadelphia, also around those areas that you kind of mentioned. So the funny thing I want to mention, I have this chat with all of my buddies, is fans, and throughout the whole year, the Cowboy Eagle fans talking all this trash, all this trash. So after the game yesterday, I put in the chat in the text crap, man, it's been so quiet in here these last few weeks. because it has been so quiet. Then they started talking, then all the stuff started talking. But yeah, Lou, like I agree with you. It's really nothing for us to be talking trash about other teams about. But it's in my blood, man. I gotta find something to talk trash about,
Well,
and it's
right. We did talk trash one time. One time there was trash talk when the Walter Payton Man of the Year was announced,
oh
and
yeah,
Dak Prescott got booed. We all just looked at my dad like, "Yo, it's never ending.
it's never
This is
ending.
the Man of the Year.
That's right.
You know, one of the most coveted things within the player community, and this man was getting booed for a Man of the Year thing. It was hilarious. You couldn't make it up. You couldn't make it up. That's the
And
one time.
shout out Charles Leonard, who came in second place on that.
Exactly. Yeah, that's huge.
But it
That's
was something because it seemed like it was always Patrick Mahomes number one though. Doug, every time we got those updates.
Well, that's what I'm surprised with you, Deuce, because when Dak won yesterday, I'm with you. Now maybe he can't win because he was in the Super Bowl. Like I'm with you. I got to do a little research on that, Deuce, because I was surprised when it was Dak, because you're right. Leno's wife would constantly post the updates on who was winning. And shout out to the fan base who really came together for Charles, because either way, whether it's Dak or Patrick Mahomes, I mean, you're talking about big fan bases with big Twitter numbers. When you go look, it's odd. When you go look at the Twitter numbers that follow the Cowboys Twitter site and the Washington, I mean, there's 1 million or 2 follower discrepancies. So even just on those tweets. So shout out to her and for the fan base for really coming together to make that happen for Charles. He got close, but you're right, Deuce. I was surprised about that. I don't know what happened there. Interesting game yesterday to me, and I said this on the show last week. This was a great lesson for us all, these two teams. These are two teams that had good quarterbacks and moved on from said good quarterbacks in the attempt to get great quarterbacks. Alex Smith was moving the Kansas City team right where it needed to go. They replaced him for a shot at Pat Mahomes, who a lot of people, as you remember back then, did not see Pat Mahomes the way Pat Mahomes is seen now. So they took a big swing there. And when Carson Wentz went down, he was in the midst of an MVP season that year, and they moved on from him. And they like the quarterback they have now. I think that's what all teams need to remember is in the league that we're in now, you can't strive for good quarterback. You've got to go for great. And that's obviously where we find ourselves, Lou, because to your point, I think the roster for Washington stands up with either one of those two teams. We just don't have nearly the quarterback play.
Yeah. I mean, that's you're so right, Doug. I mean, I've covered this team for 20 years now. 20 years I've been covering the Washington franchise, and this is one of the few years where I say to myself, there's talent everywhere, right? There's not too many places that need to be tweaked. I mean, majorly overhauled, just tweaking here and there, special teams, obviously offensive line. But I mean, there was talent everywhere, which was so good to see, right? Talent that when I looked and I saw that we had 5 Pro Bowlers, right? I'm like, yo, there's talent all over this. And you can't always say that each year with this franchise. There's talent everywhere. And that quarterback was the weak link. Now, you know, with Kansas City, I'll address that first. Andy Reid. Andy Reid is it's about time. It's way past time that we talk about him as one of the greatest coaches in NFL history. You know, not only the game plan, but but the human. You know, he not only is competent during NFL games, but the way he resonates with his players, right? If you talk to Brian Mitchell, he'll say one. I mean, everybody knows that. And now I'm a parent, right? And I know that my voice is dead and stale to my kids, right? And after 16 years in Philadelphia, how long he was in Philadelphia, his voice was just dead to them. That doesn't mean he wasn't a good coach, that doesn't mean I'm not a good father because my kids don't listen to me. I'm so glad that he is now validated in Kansas City, right? And he's done it with not one McNabb, not two Michael Vick, but three black quarterback. I mean, this man is more for the culture than some black people.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? So he's
That's
taken
true.
two of those to the Super Bowl, and the man can just coach, right? And if you pour true serum into all the players, they would say, you know what? He gets it. He understands humanity. He's a leader. He is a leader, right? And that's something that we haven't had here since Joe Jackson Gibbs, to be quite honest. A leader of men, right? We've had some good coaches.
I've got him third on my coaches list.
Who?
Behind Andy Reid. I got Belichick, the great Joe Gibbs, and Andy Reid. To me, those are the three. If we're talking football at the NFL level, to me, those are the three stalwarts.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely put Shula in there somewhere. I mean, I don't know how high up or whatever. I mean, but I'm just talking when you get the most out of players. I mean, Joe Jackson Gibbs stands alone for me. I mean, he's in 2 Hall of Fames, not just in football, but he's in race car too. I mean, that stands alone. But when you talk about a case study, which you talked about, right, and how he saw Patrick Mahomes before it even happened. That's why he was able to get rid of Alex, because he understands players and he sees talent and he understands that. Now, on the Eagles side, man, you have to give it up for Jeff Lurie and Howie Roseman and how they have put that together. They even admitted their own mistakes. That Chip Kelly was the worst, right? And they admitted it. They gave him too much power. He ruined the Eagles. Got rid of Macklin and McCoy
Shady,
and
Deshaun Jackson,
all of them, right?
And Roseman, right? Didn't he also get rid of Roseman?
Yes. But you know, he admitted the mistake, and they came back, and within years they won a Super Bowl right here in our division. You don't have to look far to see a case study, like you said, Doug, right here in our division of competent leadership and competent management, right? The quarterback is a byproduct of all that. But man, when we had Beathard and Gibbs and even Jack Kent Cook, I mean, that was competency, right? That's lacking here on a consistent basis of where, and that's why the quarterbacks, and you don't plan for offensive linemen and things of that nature, because to be quite honest, guys, man, the way that thing was set up, a marginal quarterback could have come in there. That offensive line did not give up one sack for Patrick Mahomes. And this was an Eagles team that was getting at the quarterback, and they shut him down. That's all leadership, and that's all front office management getting the right pieces. And that's how I see that.
Totally with you, Lou. And coaching.
Yes.
And coaching. I have had many NFL players tell me that the old will make adjustments at halftime is overstated. There's a game plan. There's only so much things you can do. But they went in and had enough time. Now, granted, it is a longer halftime they get for the Super Bowl, which sometimes works against you. And this for the Chiefs, it was obvious they had seen things in that Philly defense with the action and the way it kind of made those safeties rock and roll. And they got a tell on that nickel with a nickel defender. So they would make that, they had the guy in motion stop. Both of those touchdowns in the second half came that way, where the guy in the motion just ran the other way. And that was, according to Reed, Bieniemy looking at the tape real quick and saying, listen, here it is. We've got it. It's incredible, the difference between the two halves, Duece. They scored on every drive in the second half. Every one. It's incredible. It was the best team against the best quarterback yesterday. And it was a great thing to see. Were you surprised, Duece, that they were able to make such a – because I've got to tell you, at halftime, watching Mahomes limp off the field, I thought this could get ugly quick. It didn't. Were you surprised by that?
First, I want to shout out Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. And also you, Lou, been in the business for long, being a black man, going through all types of obstacles to get there. And then for them to create this history on yesterday for the first time, having 2 black starting quarterbacks, and they both came up differently, but they both proved that they belong here. And hopefully this can be a trend till we can see more of that in the future. When it comes to Patrick Mahomes, Doug, he's on that level with Tom Brady where it's like, you know what? I just can't bet against him. Right? I cannot. That's why I was always taking the Chiefs, even though I knew for a fact the Eagles had the better team. One of the things is when he went into the locker room, when he was limping in the locker room, the first thing came to my mind is that whatever drugs they have in that locker room, they're going to shoot him with it.
Yep.
And you're right about the Super Bowl. The more time that they have at halftime gave them enough time to really, be able to work on him. Now he probably was in there when they was going over the game plan, but the whole time everybody was working on him, massaging him, shooting him up, whatever it is that they had to do. Because when he came back out there, he looked like he was never injured. When he did that scramble late in the fourth quarter, it was like 30 yards or somewhere. It looked like he was never injured. And people talk about all these scripted things and all that going on. You look back, you say, yeah, that probably was scripted, but whatever they did for him at halftime. So my whole thing is when you're thinking about elite coaches, just like what you said, it's certain things that separate elite coach from great coaches to good coaches. And I always kind of look at like what you was mentioning, Doug, about the ability to adjust on the fly. Good coaches can adjust at halftime, make changes. Great coaches can do it quarter by quarter. Elite coaches can do it per possession, and they can make adjustments per possession. And that's what you had in yesterday's game. It seems like the Eagles is an early team. They've always been an early team this whole season, going up early and kind of using the second half to run out the clock. They still scored early, but they also used that technique in the first half. So now in the second half, when the Chiefs come back out and score on the first drive, I think the Eagles went into panic mode where the Chiefs already was still in this game. They never thought that they was out of it. I think the Eagles believed that they could be able to continue to grind this game out. What they have in the first half, was it like 22 minutes or something like that in the first half to the Chiefs 8, and they was only up 10. So when they come back out and score, and then to stop and then score again, it's like, oh, they're in panic mode. They're in a position that they really haven't seen all year, having to actually throw the ball in the fourth quarter and in the end of the third into the fourth quarter. So I think that right there kind of put them into a place that they didn't want to be. But as far as to the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes, they was exactly where they wanted to be. Even when they down, they are still exactly where they wanted to be. The Eagles they dominated the game, but they just kept the Chiefs hanging around. And you cannot do that with Patrick Mahomes.
Lou, you brought it up earlier about the offensive line. And before the game started, I would have assured you that I thought the Eagles had the better line. I still do. But give the Chiefs credit, and we're talking about how you build teams and how you build rosters and win games. Go back to the last Super Bowl that the Bucs were in, and he got crushed. Patrick Mahomes did against the Bucs. They went out and spent $100 million on that offensive line to make sure it didn't happen again. And it was the difference. I think it was you, Lou, said they didn't hit him. They didn't sack him one time.
Not once.
They had, what was it, 7 people with over 10 sacks this year? Yeah. Just incredible. So give them credit for self-scouting. Give Andy Reid credit for letting Tyreek Hill go when everybody thought that was the dumbest thing on the planet. They brought in other guys. Kadarius Toney, who New York apparently didn't deem good enough to play football, was out there killing it. So just, when you got guys like Andy Reid that know how to push all the buttons right, that's what you get. But give the Eagles credit because they were there the whole time. And I really thought that if you had a game where where Jalen Hurts had to throw the ball, I think I saw 30 plus times, I would have told you they got smashed. To me, that was the key to beating Philly was making Jalen Hurts beat you. And he threw some spectacular footballs yesterday. It all came down, I hate to say it, to the play at the end of the game. I'm curious how both of you stand on this. I'll start it. He grabbed the jersey by the letter of the law. It is a rule violation. I'm not sure that I am one of those that says when the moment's real big, don't call plays. That's not how I see it. How do you guys see it? Because it definitely was game altering. I mean, just to preface, there's no reason to say they don't kick the field goal and then stop the other team, the Eagles, from going down and tying the game or scoring. However, the penalty, by all accounts, ended the game as long as they could make the field goal. Lou, let's start with you. I'm curious what you thought of the penalty and how this notion of the moment was too big to call the foul.
Well, first of all, it was a little ticky-tack. I mean, when you think about that Giants game when they were here, when the guy literally raped our, person, and they didn't call that. That
same officiating crew, right?
That the level and the severity of the foul was not as great. But to be quite honest, Kansas City was whooping their behind the whole second half, so it really did not come down to that play. I mean, what would have happened is if that play didn't happen, Mahomes and Reed and Bieniemy would have found a way to play around with you just a little bit more, so you didn't have enough time on the clock. To be quite honest, though, that defense was playing so well that even if you had 2 more minutes on the clock, right, they tried to move it down to 0. But even if they had more time, I don't think the Eagles would have been able to march down the field and even get in the field goal range. So again, it is a foul. Even Bradbury said, I fouled him. I thought I was going to get away with it. I was going to get away with it, but he didn't, right? But I could go back and say, hey, look, I don't think Goddard caught that pass, right? He didn't have possession. It was all over his head. So there's so many ticky-tack plays throughout the game that you can't really put that on Bradbury or whatever. They weren't.
The second fumble for a touchdown that got called back, I thought was interesting. You're right, Lou. A lot of calls like that yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of human. I mean, anytime you have the refs involved, if you're waiting to get bailed out by them, I mean, it was a big moment, But again, that when the Giants were here and that play happened, that was egregious.
Yeah,
that was to the letter and the spirit of what that law is. That was egregious. Right now, again, just like with the Super Bowl, we have no idea if Washington in that case would have gone and made the 2-point conversion and whatever, and we don't know, right? But I think that you hold on to the whistle there because I don't think it was that egregious. But at the end of the day, you shouldn't even have been in that position, right? Kansas City was going to win that game. Mahomes, and one person that we didn't really talk about as a whole opening is that nobody else has Travis Kelce. Nobody does. Right?
I was going to get to him next. I don't understand how you can totally game plan for a man and let him still crush your whole defense. And the Eagles aren't the only one now. I mean, he does it to everybody. You got a game plan. They double bracketed him most of that game in that zone. He's a zone beater. Why they continue to stay in zone knowing he was crushing that zone, I'll never understand.
His route running, same with Gronk. There's these, even Jordan Reed when he was healthy here, the route running of the tight end can change the whole position. Philadelphia doesn't have that. They have speeders on the outside, but they don't have anybody who can go across the middle, get dinged up in there and still bounce people off. Kelce is like, that's a conversation need to be had in where he is in the pantheon of tight ends in this
number
league.
one for me, Lou.
Yeah.
Number one for me.
But you go back in time with Ozzie Newsome and so many others that it's just hard to Mackey, and there's just so many that from era to era. But current day, because there's Gonzalez, there's so many good tight ends that have been Antonio Gates. I mean, there's so many good tight ends that have come through this league. Shannon Sharp, Gronk, but what Kelce is doing right now, man, that Super Bowl is as much Kelce as it is Mahomes, because that's a reason why you said, Doug, that Andy Reid was able to say bye-bye to Reid because he had the more important receiver on there. And the way they use Kelce, makes up for a lot of things. So going back to your question, I think that it was unfortunate for the Eagles, but I don't think it would have stopped the bleeding. It was a tourniquet. They needed a tourniquet, not a Band-Aid.
When do we get to the point that, and would you be opposed to, we have enough cameras everywhere. They're already doing these immediate, what they call recalls in New York or whatever the exact word is. I mean, when do we get to the point that either A, we have full-time officials that we pay and they don't have to have other jobs. This is all they have to do is study their craft and do their craft, or just let the sky camera take care of it. Why aren't we at a place now where the sky camera can do it all? I mean, that's what we're looking for, right? Is get all these calls right. That's what they want. If you just did a sky cam, to me, it speeds the whole process up. Nobody's got to use challenges. There's got to be some do you think we're heading that way, Lou?
I think there's too much at stake now, Doug, with betting and so much things. There's too much at stake now for Roger Goodell, and they're making money hand over fist. Yep. So for not to pay the officials that are deciding the outcomes of these games, there's so many things that have gone wrong, right? That we're past that point, Doug, to be quite honest, to me. And you can't have it in your showcase game of the entire year, right? You can't have it, right? And right now, people are going to talk about a lot of things, and they're going to talk about that call, right? If you're the NFL, you don't want people talking about the product and the calls. You want to talk about heroic efforts by the players, not something that happened where a ref didn't blow a whistle or did blow a whistle. You don't want that. And you're right. If you have an extra eye in the sky and you have all of these cameras and pylon cam and, in people's jerseys and everything like that, we're already there for 4 some hours. Slow it down and get it right. Go to New York, go somewhere and get, and they even have a person in the booth now who's an ex-official.
Yeah, right.
Saying that, I wouldn't overturn this, whatever. Why aren't they using that, Doug, is a great, great question. And how many people are going to need to get burned, right, with a call, right? Whether it's a regular season, near the end of the season. I'm going back to that Giants-Washington game. That was pivotal, right? Yeah. And then in your showcase sport, where you have millions of eyes watching you, right?
Yep.
There's a portion of the audience that is watching that game saying, yo, they blew it. Yo, this and this and that. So they shouldn't have let it go. Come on, that's so ticky. I was watching the game in Philadelphia. Ticky-tack, man. That was ticky-tack. That was
ticky-tack. Well, and frankly, think about all the millionaires that are on that field and the guys that are part-time with no insurance getting whatever, scraps seems like a bad way to describe how they get paid, but you get the gist of it. They're the lowest paid people on, and they're going to take the biggest heat for what happens. I think it's easy to move on from there. Duece, everybody's always going to be talking about the halftime show. I've seen mixed results. We won't spend a ton of time on it because it's a football show, but what did you think about the halftime show?
Ooh.
Since we're not going to spend a ton of time on it, she was pregnant and did what she did. That's
Very
it.
Pregnant.
That's all I got.
I loved it.
I did too.
I mean, full disclosure, I'm from Barbados. My family is from Barbados. So, and my mom's from Jamaica, my dad's from Barbados. So to be quite honest, halftime was game time for me because she's my countrywoman and she just rocked the whole thing. And I just loved it. I loved it. So I just, I don't know if her elevating into the sky and everything like that. I thought it was cool. Cool.
I was surprised she did the whole thing by herself. Usually they bring in some kind of second act. But I'll tell you what, it was a reminder of all the hits she's had. She's put out some huge ones. And you couldn't get me 100 feet up in the air right now, much less 6 months pregnant. So shout out to her. Let's take just a little bit here and look forward to the off season and things that will be coming. It's interesting. I said on this show last week that I wondered if a new owner could be already looking out there at a GM, head coach possibilities, because these guys, let's take a guy like Jim Nagy, that runs the Super Bowl. If you went and offered him your GM job, not that he'd take it, just as a name, Louis Riddick, whoever, are guys that are out there studying film constantly. So it's not like if you called them and say, hey, you want the gig, that they'd be so far behind the eight ball because they haven't been paying attention. So this concept, while I still think that in reality, we won't see major changes until next season, this idea that it just can't happen because it doesn't happen, to me, again, when we talk about outdated and antiquated ideas, that's what this is. I think a new owner could eat, especially if he's going to buy the team. If the new owner comes in 3 weeks, that's plenty of time to get a whole new regime set in. Duece, is that what you want at this point, or would you rather go one more year with Ron?
The only thing that I question is, does this owner already have a front office set up? Like who is out there that's not assigned to a team right now, that's just kind of out there that he can kind of put together without breaking any, rules when it comes to the NFL and tampering those things. Does he have anything together front office wise? Like, that's the question for me. And is it enough time within the next couple of weeks to establish a strong foundation there and letting go of the top guys? Because we know when if that is the case, if they do come in, they have their guys, they're not going to just fire everybody in the building, right? Like, they're not. That's just bad business. They're not going to do that. Maybe they'll fire the top guys, promote the assistants up, plug their guys in there just to kind of learn what's going on, learn the draft. Because these guys in the scout, like, they've been working for years about this draft class. You can't just fire them and delete all of their records. Like, you still need those guys in the building. So what we're really talking about, if someone is going to come in and bring in someone to replace the GM, possibly to replace Ron Rivera, a new head coach. But as far as the lower level guys, those guys is going to still be in place. So I just kind of asked myself, how much would that matter if they do that when it comes to Ron Rivera and the guys that's like Mayhew and Ron and Hurney and those guys? Like, is that going to matter so much if the guys that's actually doing the grunt work is still in place and still there? So, but that's my only thing is, if you're going to do that, make sure you have some guys like a Louis Riddick. Like, he's the guy that's out there right now that you can say, new owner come in. I mean, just think about it. I mean, it is just hypothetical, right? This is what we want. Jeff Bezos, Jay-Z, Louis Riddick. I mean, that sounds like a good little lineup for me in a sense, but just bringing in someone like Louis Riddick that knows the ropes. He's been here before. He understands the processes. You bring him in and you keep some on lower level guy, but just don't come in with a buddy of yours that we haven't seen, in the league at any elite level in years, or, someone, because we know all the guys that's been rumored to beat bidders are business guys, except for Josh Harris, that was kind of late. He's been in the game as far as, hockey and basketball, but those other guys is business guys. And I think their first priority is business, reestablishing the relationships that has been broken over the years, working on this new stadium, getting all those things set up. I just think football is going to be second nature to them. Yes, they're going to know a little bit about it because they're going to have to. They're going to be asked. But I think new owners coming in, their main focus should be on the business side first.
Lou, I brought this up because I'm sure you saw the interview like the rest of us. When Sean Payton says potential ownership had reached out to me about the position, which I thought was surprising, particularly since everybody laughed at Rex Ryan when he brought it up a couple of weeks ago. But so, I mean, does that kind of frame your thoughts on how the offseason may go?
No, I think you stay with Ron. I mean, obviously, Sean is out there to talk. I mean, if it gets out, whoop-de-doo, they talk to him. I mean, I would have talked to him too, right? If that was the case. I think sometimes it's just clickbait and we go off it or whatever. But at the end of the day, you need some. Again, I started off by saying we have a lot of talent on this roster. Mm-hmm. They love Ron Rivera. They do. They do. They legit. That video when he announced the Pro Bowlers wasn't fake. I mean, they really love this guy, Jeremy Reed. Even with all the mistakes, he's a flawed person. Now, I like linebacker Ron Rivera more than I like CEO Ron Rivera, right? Okay. Linebacker Ron Rivera says, yo, I made a change, right? CEO Ron Rivera comes back and says, you know what? I had a bad day. I had to apologize for the team for saying some comment, which was true. That what's different between the rest of the division and Washington? He said the quarterback. The quarterback was the reason, right? That's linebacker, Bears linebacker Ron Rivera, right? Then when he said, I came back and I had to apologize for the team. I had a bad day. Why are you apologizing? You didn't apologize when you on the first day you throw the rookie the linebacker Jeremy Davis. You didn't apologize then. So there's parts of Ron Rivera that I like, and there's parts of Ron Rivera that these guys will run through a wall for, right? And I'm thinking if you're a new owner and you're coming in, right? You give Ron. I mean, Ron is on the hot seat. I mean, his time is ticking, right? And maybe that's why you get a Eric Bieniemy or somebody, because you know that if Ron falters, your way to the top spot is right there. I think Bieniemy should just stay in Kansas City, because when Andy Reid retires, right, which he will at some point, you got Patrick Mahomes right there. So just stay put. That's me. But I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot of movement, and I don't think that the talk of people talking to other people, just like we don't know who the owner is going to be, it's all stuff that's, it's really not relevant to me at this point until it actually happens. But what I do know is Ron is there. Ron, even with all of his faults, even with some of the stuff, I don't think that Turner was the right person, and I don't think that Ron really worked well with him, putting him on the field, up there, whatever. They didn't know what to do with this guy, right? Yep. Right? But I do feel that even with all of that, guys, you were a couple games away from making it into the playoffs. And I think instead of starting from ground zero and bringing in a whole new coach, whatever, see what Ron is going to do now that he is at the foot to his fire, see what will happen. So I think that you stay with him for at least one more year.
And that's perfect from what you said, because like you said, anytime when Ron, the linebacker, and Ron, a team president, is in the same place, in the same chair, you just don't know what he's talking about. Like, he just says all type. You're like, huh? What do you mean, Ron? It's just when he's taking on both roles at the same time, it's very bad. But I like that linebacker, Ron. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, and I've always said this, and I feel more validated now than ever by it. The GM and the head coach have two polar opposite jobs. I mean, those jobs couldn't be any different. The head coach's job is to win right now. I got to win games right now. The GM's job is to make sure that the pantry is stocked now, but also looking ahead to make sure that, Ron can't afford to look. It's too hard for one man to be looking ahead and winning right now. And that's why nobody does it. I mean, even Andy Reid, when given the opportunity to go to Kansas City and be the GM, hired a GM. It's too much. It doesn't work harmoniously for the outcome. Now, what I think I would prefer, I actually like Ron Rivera, the president of football ops. I like when Ron is delegating. I like when Ron's got, Jack doing the defense. I like the idea that the offense didn't work. So I think he was a year late on getting rid of the coordinator. I wish he'd have made that move sooner. But if Ron's just going to be the guy that delegates jobs and let everybody do their thing, I would much rather him be up in a VP role or president of football ops type role, because I think his weakest link is on game decisions, timing, game flow, when to go for it, when to call the timeout. I mean, God bless him, the man didn't know we needed the Browns game. So like those are things that frustrate me. So that because the roster is where it is, I almost would be more willing, if he was, to put him up in a business role than to leave him on the field. Probably wouldn't take that kind of demotion, but just personally, that's why I feel he fits better in that role.
Yeah, I like it. And I have to give Doc Walker a lot of credit. He's the one who opened my eyes to this whole, Ron being one way and the other way. And I've dissected it from all the interviews and times I've gone out to the park and listened to him. And you're right. There's times where Ron doesn't give a bleep, right? And I like that Ron, because Ron doesn't give a bleep. But when he starts caring about what other people think, and he's backtracking and everything like that, that's kind of more what I mean, like the backtracking and everything like that. Now you're right. There was a couple of big time guffaws during the season where you're just like, what? You played the game. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
You know this. I'm in the press box and I see it. Come on, right? But then there's that he's for the players. Like, he just won that Salute to Excellence awards for, during the NFL honors. I mean, the one thing that during my Holder hangout, when I talked to from Mike Tirico to Stacey Dales to all these people, they say the one constant and the one thing league wide that everybody can say about the Washington franchise is their respect for Ron Rivera. Right?
Yeah.
You couldn't say that universally, unilaterally. You couldn't say that about Jay Gruden.
That's right.
You couldn't, right? So I'm like, I know it's been said before, he battled cancer, his mother died, he has a whole bunch of stuff going on, but I still think there's some good use of Ron as a coach, right? Because they love him, right? And I don't know if going into the front office as a VP role, I don't know if this next person coming in was going to have that connection with these particular groups of players at this time. That's why I'm thinking that if you have Sam Howell and somebody else, right, and you give it one last shot, right, you give Daron Payne all of Carson Wentz's money so you can keep him, build up those offensive and defensive lines, right, and give it one last shot with Ron. I think he deserves, or at least I would give him another shot, because in 20 years I've seen all the different things that have gone here, and I don't think that there has been a person that is more unilaterally liked by his players than Ron Rivera. That's why I was saying that, Doug, as far as him being the coach.
No, and there's something to be said for that. And it's funny because you can talk yourself into circles on this thing, because then I go to if they had gotten at any point the quarterback right, and they tried. I mean, how many teams did this Commanders team get if you just take out quarterback Commanders and insert Jalen Hurts? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like if they had worked the Stafford trade 2 years ago, I mean, where is this team at now? Again, that's the guy buying the groceries, and that's Ron Rivera. But the fact is, he has tried. He just hadn't gotten there. His problem is you only get so many chances to get it. And I don't think they're going to make a big move this year. I guess it'll be Sam Howell. I still find it interesting that Ron had to be convinced to play Sam Howell in the final game. And now all of a sudden he's the preemptive starter going into camp. But I guess that's a story for another day, as they say. Duece, I'm curious, tell us a little bit about how you guys got started with the Twitter Spaces, how they work, and when people can hop on them, because it's a really cool thing that you can do on Twitter now.
Yeah, Doug, you've been on there, and Lou, hopefully, one day you can be able to stop by. But last year, they started it. It was a group of guys that kind of was starting on. We all familiar with Spaces is, and just opening up spaces just to talk ball. 3-4 people just talking. And after a couple months went by, a group of guys had got together, and they just formed this little group and said, "Hey, look, let's kind of dedicate this into a more streamlined, set times throughout the week." And they started from 9 to 12 every day. And then it just kind of evolved. I started on Twitter, I think in May, I believe, April, May. And I was kind of joining the Twitter Spaces, and Lou, it gets fun. I mean, it got all different types of teams. NFL teams has their own spaces, and they have some spaces when it's all the teams. We just get in there, just talk trash, just have fun. It's just like being in the barbershop, but because we know COVID changed the way that we socialize. So this was a good coping mechanism for a lot of people. And then recently, the guy that was kind of running everything is CJ. He just received another job offer, which is going to prevent him from hosting the Spaces. So I kind of came in and kind of took on that. So every day is from 11 to 2. me and a few other people on the. We kind of created this board because we're looking to do many things. We created this community with all Commanders fans is joining in, people that like to just come in and talk ball. We have spaces throughout the day, but we have that main one every day from 11 to 1. There's so many things we're looking to do. I mean, last year we gave away tickets to the game, we gave away merchandise, provided transportation. With my platform that I have, and with them, like Hog Farmers is a part of everything. They're charitable foundation where, in order for you to qualify anything, you have to, support them in some sort of way. So that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to get into more community things and just build something here, try to establish our community over, and it's not just about the new, it's about the old, all the way back from way back when, all the way to now, in the whole Washington community. And that's what we're trying to do. And we just talk ball. It get a little spicy sometimes, but the first time Doug got a little spicy a couple of days ago with the Chiefs fan. Yeah, Doug got spicy. Doug got a little spicy with the Chiefs fan.
Why is that not surprising to me?
It was all in good sport, but yeah, those
Duece, the red zone in the red zone.
Yeah, Red Zone in the Lab podcast.
Red Zone, I could not get it off my tongue, but the guest list is getting like that. Plenty of big name guys coming through. The podcast is tightening up. It looks good. You got that thing dropping once a week now?
Yeah, so we've kind of grown a little, and Lou, I got a lot to thank to Big Doug. When I first came out, he was like my first or second guest. I even DM'd him because I was like, I know this might be a long shot, so when I asked you to come, he was like, no, ain't no long shot. Because Doug looked like a big timer. He had all the big guests, and his name is Big Doug. So I'm like, man, this gonna be a long shot. But he came on, and from that day till now, he always is willing to help me out, answer all the questions that we have. But yes, I have a podcast called Red Zone in the Lab. Podcast. It's just not about football. It's about business. It's about mental awareness. Is also about entrepreneurship, Black business, history. We have some episodes, some HBCUs just talking about, what that whole process is, how HBCUs is not looked at when you first, we have these smart Black kids that's coming out. HBCUs is always like the second choice. They always try to get in these other Ivy Leagues, and they realize the HBCU should have been first. So we have all of those, and we just started Owning the Huddle podcast that I have with a couple other guys. It's the thing about providing platforms for people on spaces that don't have the media credentials to do things, but they like talking sports and they know ball. And we have NFL Live podcast, which is a live show. A couple people just talk about the whole NFL. That's starting back up. I'm just producing that. I'm not going to be on that. And Doug, just to let you know, I guess this is like breaking news. We also have 2 additional podcasts that's coming out. One of them is called Walk with Riri, where she's just going to be talking about, just the mental things, and just talking to people about, different struggles that people have and all different types of subject, just basic conversations. And then what I call like a young buck podcast is some young adults just talking ball. How they can get. It's called Caleb and Kadar. That team from DC that's coming out. So we're looking to do some big things this year. But again, Lou, Doug, I got this issue. How do you do this? How do you do that? He'll just send me a message. Hey, look, try this and try that. I'm sorry I was so long-winded, man, but it's just an honor to be able to
when I put the show together, I had specifically thought about you two because, Lou, I know that's what your YouTube channel is, a lot of great interviews, but not all about sports. So I thought that the two of you would appreciate coming from kind of the same spot there on what you're trying to do with your platforms.
No, and I appreciate I can second that about Doug. I mean, he reached out to me when I was getting some interviews, and he had me come on. I was like, but near the end, I will tell you this, Doug, your name is like. There was one conversation. We were all the media people who covered the team, the beat writers. We were all in Commander's Park just sitting around, right? And your name came up as far as who's been on with Doug, right? And everybody's like, oh, I've been on with him. You haven't been on with him? Yo, you better get on with him, right? So it's like one of those things like, yo, when you on Doug's show, right, it's kind of blowing up. So we were talking about all those people who have these platforms. And Doug, you're up there, man.
Yeah.
But I like the way that you've helped. You've told me a little bit, things that I can do, and I think that this space. I mean, obviously, when I first got here, Steve Spurrier's first year, Patrick Ramsey's first year,
Ooh, Steve
Daryl
Spurrier.
Green's last year.
Last year.
There was none of this. There was none of this. It was like, one, the athletes had to wait for us to put a mic in front of them to get their word out. Now these athletes have bigger platforms than some of the stations, and then the byproduct is that all these other people who are supplying content, man, it's a great way to meet new people. Thank you, Doug, for no. I mean, that's an orchestrator. When you do this stuff, you're like, yo, he could be good with this person, and he could be because you pick the guests, right?
I did.
And so it's really fascinating. And Stuart Scott, my mentor, my late mentor, and James Brown both told me the same thing, right? It's not the craft, it's the people that you meet along the way while performing the craft that makes a good career, right? So, I mean, anybody can get on a mic. I thank you for all the accolades. And, I have my Emmy Award, and I've been doing this for a long time. But when it's all said and done, after I look back at my career, it ain't going to be so much the stories that I covered. It's the people that I've met along the way, right? That means the most to me, because at the end of the day, right, I don't know who I'm going to affect, right? My life quote is by Jackie Robinson that says, a life is not important except the impact that it has on other lives. And Doug, you are affecting a lot of people, a lot of people's lives by giving them the platform and the courage to maybe try something and do something new. And some of the stuff that I've done with the Holder Hangout since the beginning to now is because of you, Doug. Something that you told me, or, maybe times that I posted something. I don't know about all. I mean, come on, man. Algorithms. Doug told me about algorithms. I'm like, dude, I mean, it's another job for me, man. I got other stuff going on. But it's like, oh, you got to post it at this time and everything like that. I was like, okay. And I tried it, and lo and behold, look at the numbers started. And I was like, thank you, Doug. So I think it's people along the way that make your journey. And now I've met a new friend, and we're going to talk especially about that entrepreneur and Black, HBCU. I'm doing some broadcasting for HBCU.
I was going to say, I didn't want to get out of here, Lou, without talking about that. I saw you were just up the road from me. Next time you're in Jacksonville, you holler at me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm just down the road in Wilmington. So I was in Carolina, you holler at me. But yeah, that looked awesome. The Jacksonville State game, right?
Yeah, it was. Well, I did.
How'd you get put on with them real quick?
Charlie Neal, who's the godfather of HBCU sports, Byron Allen put a lot of money into this HBCU Go, this network, and everybody was riding the wave of Dion, right? So they started to do more broadcast. They started to put a whole bunch of money to it, and they started at football season. But then when it came to basketball, Charlie said, I can't make all these games. So he trusted me. He knows that I would do a good job or whatever. So he asked me to do some games. I've been to Fayetteville State. I've been to Winston-Salem. I'm going down to Petersburg to cover Virginia State and Bowie State this week. And, the basketball games are great, but the stories that you're seeing from these kids that go to these HBCUs, man, it's great. And that's why I got into sport. That's why I got into broadcasting to begin with, to tell stories, right? So I'm happy for this new connection. And Doug, you're just you're a gem for the craft, man. You're doing great things, and we appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate you guys. That's it. You said a bunch of nice stuff about me, so we can wrap the show. No, I appreciate you guys for coming on, and I'll see both of you again soon.
All right.
Thank you, fellas.
All right.